In the shadowed halls of Henry Moretti's mansion, Audrey Constance knelt on the 7th step, scrubbing at a bloodstain that always returned. The lock on the west wing clicked open without warning. A small boy emerged, clutching a torn teddy bear against his chest. Luca, 6 years old, had not spoken in 2 years. His dark eyes met Audrey's, trembling. Then, he whispered one word, "Mom." The armed guards froze. Cameras whirred. Henry Moretti stepped from the darkness. From that single word, secrets would unravel, betrayal would bloom, and love would ignite a war that would redefine them all. Audrey Constance had turned 30 in a hospital break room, her scrubs still damp from a 12-hour shift in the emergency ward. She had been a nurse then, efficient and gentle, the kind of woman patients asked for by name. But that life ended the night her husband died with a bullet in his chest, drowning in debts to men who dealt in fear. The bank took the house. The hospital could not save her from the creditors who knew her schedule. So she traded her stethoscope for a mop, her diagnostic skills for the ability to clean quickly and keep her mouth shut. She was patient where others would break, brave in the quiet way of ordinary people who do the right thing even when terror lives in their bones. She feared violence but refused to compromise her core. Now she had one goal: earn enough to pay off the last of the debt and keep her younger brother Archie in school. The 17-year-old had already dropped out once. She could not let him fall again. Beneath it all lived a wound that would not close, the guilt of a healer who could not save the one person who mattered most. That guilt had made her allergic to failure, to loss, to the sight of someone suffering within reach. Henry Moretti was 38 and ruled his empire with the precision of a surgeon and the coldness of winter steel. He had built his power on discipline and the law of silence, a code that erased mercy in favor of survival. But beneath the tailored suits and calculated cruelty lived a father hollowed by grief. His wife Serena had been murdered 2 years ago, and their son Luca had witnessed it. The boy had not spoken since. Henry imposed a single rule across every room, every hallway, every breath taken inside his walls. Trust no one, especially outsiders, and anyone who touched his son would vanish before dawn. Yet this rule had also become his prison. He could protect Luca from bullets, but not from silence. He could eliminate enemies, but not ghosts. Luca was 6. Small for his age, with eyes that held too much memory for a child. He clung to a teddy bear with one ear missing, its stuffing leaking from a torn seam. He listened to Debussy's Clair de Lune on repeat, the same melody his mother had hummed. He drew circles on paper, always incomplete, always broken. The doctors said it was a manifestation of fragmented memory, a mind trying to close loops it could not finish. He had not spoken a word in 2 years, not to his father, not to the therapists, not even in his sleep. Only his eyes spoke, dark and watchful, tracking every movement, every person, searching for something he could not name. The supporting players moved through the mansion like pieces on a chessboard. Bridget, the head housekeeper, ran the staff with military efficiency. Leon drove Henry to meetings no one discussed afterward. Zane commanded the security team with paranoia that bordered on obsession. Finn, the most loyal gunman, watched everything and said nothing. Dante served as Henry's second in command, charismatic and sharp, though whispers suggested ambition had begun to outgrow loyalty. William, a private investigator, dug through the past for answers Henry demanded. George, the family lawyer, navigated the legal minefields. Adelaide worked as a speech therapist who had failed to coax a single word from Luca. Farah, a nurse Henry kept on retainer, monitored the boy's health. Ingrid, a child psychologist, visited twice a month with reports that never changed. And Archie, Audrey's younger brother, waited tables after school. Unaware his sister now worked in a place where blood was a recurring stain. The mansion sat in the outskirts of Chicago, surrounded by walls too high and cameras too numerous. The West Wing remained locked at all times, its door heavy as a vault. From within, Clair de Lune played on a loop, faint and ghostly. The city beyond buzzed with news of gang wars, territories shifting, bodies found in rivers. Inside, the air smelled of gun oil and expensive wood polish. Everything gleamed except for the seventh step, where a stain always returned no matter how thoroughly Audrey scrubbed. 3 mysteries hung over the house like smoke. Who truly killed Serena? Why did the West Wing remain sealed, filled with music and memory? And why would a boy who had not spoken in 2 years choose this moment, this woman, to break his silence? Bridget interviewed Audrey in a sitting room lined with paintings whose frames cost more than most cars. The housekeeper's eyes were sharp as she assessed the woman across from her. You clean fast, you clean well, and you know when to keep your mouth closed. The pay is unusual. $2,500 a week. Cash. You will not ask questions. You will not look Henry Moretti in the eye. You will not open the West Wing. And you will not, under any circumstances, touch the boy. Do you understand? Audrey nodded. Her hands folded in her lap. She understood desperation. She understood the weight of rules designed to protect something fragile. The offer was triple what she made anywhere else. She could clear the debt in 4 months. She could save Archie's future. She signed the contract without reading the fine print. Her first day began at dawn. The hallways stretched long and dim, lined with antique mirrors and paintings of people who looked perpetually disappointed. Cracked glass in gilded frames, the scent of gunpowder that clung to the carpets, the hum of cameras tracking her every step. Bridget walked her through the main floor, the east wing, the kitchens, but when they reached the corridor leading west, the older woman stopped. That wing is sealed. The boy stays there. You do not go near it. The cameras will know if you do. Audrey noticed the locks, the reinforced hinges, the way even the light seemed dimmer near that door. At the end of her first shift, she carried her supplies to the grand staircase and began scrubbing the 7th step. The bloodstain was old, faded to rust, but it sat in the grain of the wood like a scar. She scrubbed until her knuckles ached. By morning, the stain had returned. That night, lying in the small room Bridget had assigned her in the staff quarters, Audrey heard it. Claire de Lune, soft and distant, drifting through the walls. She rose and moved to her door, peering into the hallway. A camera swiveled to follow her like a mechanical eye. She stepped back inside, but the music continued. A lullaby turned into a haunting. On her 3rd day, Audrey found the teddy bear abandoned in a hallway near the West Wing. It was small, ragged, with one button eye hanging by a thread and stuffing bleeding from a torn seam. She knew instantly it belonged to Luca. The rules had been clear. Do not touch the boy. Do not touch his things. But Audrey had been a nurse. She had spent years mending what others overlooked. She glanced at the camera, then picked up the bear. In her room that night, she used a needle and thread from her emergency kit, stitching the seam closed with small, precise movements. She sewed the button eye back into place. When she finished, she walked to the West Wing door and set the bear down just outside, placing it gently on the floor where Luca would see it when he emerged. The next morning, a glass of warm milk appeared on the breakfast table, placed near the empty chair at the far end. No name card, no explanation. Bridget noticed, but said nothing. Audrey continued her rounds, mopping the floors in slow, deliberate strokes. As she worked near the locked door, she let the soapy water form a circle on the tile, complete and unbroken. It was an echo of the shapes Luca drew, the circles he could never finish. She did not know if he would see it. She did not know if it mattered. But in the language of small kindnesses, intention counted more than certainty. That evening, the teddy bear was gone from the hallway. In its place, outside Audrey's door, lay a piece of paper. On it, drawn in careful crayon, was a circle. For the first time, the line connected, whole, unbroken. Luca had understood. Henry Moretti found the glass of milk and the repaired bear within an hour. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his jaw tight, his knuckles white against the countertop. Bridget appeared beside him, her voice low. The new girl. Audrey. Henry's eyes narrowed. Who gave her permission? Bridget shook her head. No one. Sir. Henry moved through the halls like a storm gathering strength. He found Audrey in the library, dusting shelves with steady hands. She turned when she sensed him, and for a moment, their eyes met. His were cold, gray as winter fog. Hers were steady, tired, but unafraid. You touched the boy's things. It was not a question. Audrey set down her cloth. I mended a torn toy and left it where he could find it. I put out a glass of milk. I did not touch him. Henry stepped closer. The rules exist for a reason. To forget is to survive. To heal is to open wounds that should stay closed. Audrey met his gaze without flinching. To forget is to bury pain. To heal is to let it breathe. And then let it go. There is a difference, Mr. Moretti. The air between them crackled with opposing philosophies. He believed in control, in severing the past to protect the present. She believed in tending wounds, in trusting that acknowledgement led to recovery. Zane appeared in the doorway, his hand resting on the gun at his hip, his suspicion palpable. Sir, should I run a deeper background check? Finn stood further back, silent, observing. Henry's gaze remained locked on Audrey. Touch the boy again, and you will leave this house. Permanently. Audrey nodded once. Understood. But as Henry walked away, he caught his reflection in the mirror lining the hallway. For just a moment, the angle of Audrey's face, the shape of her eyes, the way she held herself overlapped with a memory of Serena. His breath caught. He forced himself to keep walking, but the image stayed burned into his thoughts. It rained the night Luca emerged. The storm rolled in fast, thunder shaking the windows, lightning flickering through the curtains. The power stuttered. Audrey was cleaning the main staircase when she heard Claire de Lune drifting through the halls, softer than usual, almost fragile. She began to hum along, her voice barely audible, her hands moving in rhythm as she wiped down the banister. She placed the repaired teddy bear on the 7th step, the same step where the bloodstain lived. She did not look toward the west wing. She simply worked, her humming a thread of sound in the storm. The lock clicked. The door opened just a crack. Luca stepped into the hallway, his small frame backlit by the dim light from his room. His eyes fixed on Audrey's hands, the way they moved in time with the music, steady and calm. He watched her for a long moment. Then, hesitant, he reached out and touched the hem of her apron, his fingers barely grazing the fabric. Audrey froze. She did not turn. She did not speak. She simply let him hold on, let him decide when to let go. After a moment, he released the fabric and stepped back into the shadows. That night, the security footage captured Luca standing outside Audrey's door for 11 minutes. He did not knock. He simply stood, his teddy bear pressed to his chest, his eyes on the crack of light beneath her door. The next morning, in the kitchen, with Henry watching from the doorway and Bridget holding her breath, Luca looked directly at Audrey. His lips parted. His voice, unused for 2 years, came out rough and small. Mom. The words shattered the silence like glass. Henry stood frozen. Bridget gasped. Zane's hand moved to his radio, uncertain what protocol covered this. Finn watched from the corner, his expression unreadable, and Audrey, who had been pouring orange juice, set the pitcher down slowly, her hands trembling. Her eyes met Luca's. The boy did not look away. He had not called her by name. He had called her by function, by the role she represented. Safety. Care. The person who mends what is broken. Henry's voice cut through the shock. Bridget. My office. Now. He turned and walked away, his stride too fast, his control slipping. Bridget followed. Audrey knelt down, not touching Luca but close enough that he could reach her if he chose. She whispered, her voice gentle. "I hear you." The boy's fingers tightened around the teddy bear. His lips moved. But no other words came. Not yet. But the door had opened. Henry interrogated Bridget with the precision of a prosecutor. Why did he speak? Why did he call her that? Bridget had no answers. "Sir." She cleaned. She mended his bear. She left small kindnesses. She did not push. Henry paced, his mind racing. He pulled open a drawer in his desk and removed a photograph of Serena, taken years ago. Before the violence, before the fear. He studied the angle of her jaw, the softness in her eyes, the way she smiled with her whole face. He set it beside a still image from that morning's security footage, a frame capturing Audrey as she knelt near Luca. The resemblance was not exact, but it was there, undeniable in its echoes, the shape of compassion, the posture of someone who led with care instead of force. He slammed the drawer shut. William, the investigator, arrived that afternoon with new files. "Mr. Moretti, we have confirmation. Dante was in contact with Serena the week before her death. Phone records, encrypted messages, meetings he did not log. But the evidence disappeared from evidence lockup. Someone with access, someone close, made sure the case went cold." Henry's jaw tightened. Dante, the man he had trusted for a decade, the man who stood beside him through every war. William nodded. "And there is more. An anonymous message was sent to your secure line this morning. A photograph of Audrey and Luca in the kitchen. The caption read, 'Your new weakness.'" Henry dismissed William and called Ingrid, the child psychologist. She arrived within the hour. After reviewing the footage and speaking briefly with Audrey, Ingrid sat across from Henry in his office. Luca did not mistake her for Serena. He called her mom because she represents a function, not a person. Safety, reliability, someone who will not leave. Children who have suffered trauma often attach to archetypes, not identities. She is performing the role his mind needs to begin healing. Henry leaned back in his chair. "So I let her continue and risk making my son dependent on a stranger. Or I remove her and confirm for him that no one stays." Ingrid's expression was calm. "Those are your only two options if you continue to see this as a problem of control. But there is a third option. You could see it as an opportunity for Luca to learn that care does not always come with loss." Zane was certain Audrey was a plant, a spy sent by rivals or law enforcement. To test her loyalty, he staged an accident. He dropped a folder in front of her, financial records spilling across the floor. Pages marked with account numbers and offshore entities. Audrey glanced down at the papers, then back at Zane. She did not touch them. She stepped over them carefully and continued to the supply closet. Zane picked up the folder, his expression unreadable. Henry watched from the security room, his eyes on the monitor. He saw Audrey change her schedule, clocking in earlier so her shifts aligned with when Luca woke. But never once did she approach the boy's room without reason. She worked within the rules, bending them only through proximity, never violation. Finn discovered the blind spot in the garden cameras, a section where the angle had been manually adjusted. Someone inside the house had access to the system. Someone knew how to move unseen. He reported it directly to Henry, bypassing Zane. Henry's suspicion deepened. A ticking clock began to loom. Friday. The day Henry was scheduled to finalize a consolidation deal, merging 3 territories under a single banner. If Dante planned to make a move, it would be before that signature. He had 72 hours. Audrey asked Adelaide, the speech therapist, for permission to try a different approach. Music and safe touch, bridging instead of pushing. Adelaide was skeptical, but agreed to observe. They prepared the West Wing sitting room. A piano stood in the corner, dust on its keys. Audrey did not play. She simply opened the lid, letting the light catch the ivory. Luca entered slowly, Ingrid standing near the door. Audrey sat on the floor, not at the piano, her hands resting on her knees. She hummed Clair de Lune. Luca moved closer. Audrey placed her hand on the floor, palm down, half a meter from where Luca stood. She did not reach for him. She simply offered proximity, a bridge he could choose to cross. Luca stared at her hand. Then, slowly, he sat down. His fingers touched the floor near hers, not close enough to overlap, but close enough to connect. His mouth opened. Milk. The word came out cracked. Then another. Safe. And finally, stay. Each word was a stone laid in a path. Henry stood in the doorway, hidden by shadow. His eyes burned. His chest tightened. He had spent 2 years building walls to protect his son from pain, but in doing so, he had also walled him away from hope. He watched as Luca's small hand inched closer to Audrey's, and he made a choice. He did not interrupt. For the first time since Serena's death, he allowed something he could not control. George, the lawyer, arrived the next morning with a blunt assessment. An empire cannot stand on a boy's silence. You must either protect him at all costs, which means cutting ties with everything that makes you vulnerable, or you accept that vulnerability is now part of your structure. Henry did not respond immediately. Leon entered, his face grim. "Sir, I have audio." A conversation leaked from one of Dante's encrypted calls. "I believe he is planning to target Audrey and the boy to destabilize your position before the Friday signing." Henry stood. "Give Finn full operational authority. Pull Zane's access to the camera grid. I want him isolated until I know where his loyalty sits." Zane, learning of his demotion, did not protest, but his silence carried the weight of resentment. The storm returned Thursday night. Rain hammered the roof. The power cut out at 11:17. The backup generators kicked in, but the security system went dark for 12 minutes. In that window, glass shattered in the west wing. Dante's team entered through a garden door that should have been locked, but had been left ajar from the inside. Zane's doing. Audrey heard the crash. She ran to Luca's room. The boy was awake, his eyes wide, his breathing rapid. Audrey knelt beside him. "We need to go somewhere safe. Can you walk with me?" Luca nodded. She took his hand, and together they moved through the darkened hallways. She remembered a door near the kitchens, one that led to a wine cellar, deep and hidden. She guided Luca down the stairs, her hand steady on his back. She closed the door and locked it from the inside. In the darkness, Luca began to hyperventilate. Audrey placed her hand on his chest. "Breathe with me. 4 counts in." She counted aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out for 8. Luca followed her rhythm, his panic easing. She hummed Clair de Lune softly, letting the melody wrap around them like a shield. Above, footsteps pounded, voices shouted. Audrey reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object, a set of keys on a ring with a wind chime charm. She shook it gently, creating a faint tinkling sound, then hung it on a pipe near the cellar entrance. When the footsteps approached, the draft from the opening door would make it chime. A distraction, a false lead. The men moved past, following the sound down the wrong corridor. Luca's voice broke the silence. "Dad." The word was raw, desperate. It was the first time he had called for his father aloud in 2 years. Dante, upstairs in the main hall, heard the echo. "The boy is talking. End this now." Henry moved through the house like a predator, Finn and 2 others flanking him. The halls were lined with mirrors, a design Serena had chosen because she loved how light reflected and multiplied. Now those mirrors became a tactical nightmare. Reflections overlapped. Movement seemed to come from everywhere. Henry turned a corner and found Audrey and Luca emerging from a side passage. He moved instinctively, placing himself between them and the approaching footsteps. Dante stepped into view, his gun raised but his expression almost regretful. "You made yourself weak, Henry. That boy, this woman, they are anchors dragging you down. Serena knew it. That is why she tried to leave. And you know who gave the order to stop her." Henry's breath stilled. "You?" Dante smiled faintly. "I saved your empire." She would have dismantled everything. The West Wing. That room. You locked it because you knew. Deep down, you knew. Audrey stepped in front of Luca, her body a shield. Henry raised his weapon, but Dante was faster. The shot rang out. Henry lunged. The bullet meant for Audrey struck him in the shoulder, spinning him back. He stayed on his feet, his gun still raised. Finn burst into the corridor, his weapon trained on Dante. "Freeze." Dante hesitated. Then Zane appeared from a side door, his gun aimed not at Dante but at Finn. "Zane, what are you doing?" Finn's voice was calm, too calm. Zane's jaw tightened. "He gave me a choice. Step aside or get buried with the old regime." Finn did not move. "Then you made the wrong choice." The standoff shattered. Finn fired, disarming Zane. Leon appeared, tackling Dante to the ground. Henry collapsed against the wall, blood spreading across his shirt. Audrey moved to him, her nurse training surging back. Pressure. Elevation. Keep him conscious. She pressed her hands against the wound. Henry's eyes found hers. "Do not leave him. Please." His voice cracked. Audrey nodded. "I will not." Luca stood frozen, his teddy bear clutched tight, tears streaming down his face. "Dad." The word came again, stronger this time. Henry reached out with his uninjured hand. Luca took it. Dante was restrained. A hard drive pulled from his jacket containing transaction logs, communications, and evidence of his role in Serena's death and the planned coup. Zane fled through the garden but was apprehended by William and a team of federal agents who had been waiting outside on Henry's orders. The Empire's corruption ran deep, but Henry had been preparing an exit strategy for months, long before Audrey arrived. He had simply needed the right catalyst to see it through. Henry survived surgery. The bullet had missed the major arteries. As he lay in the hospital bed, pale and weakened, he turned to George and William. "I want full immunity for Audrey and protective custody if needed. I will hand over the financial network, the laundering operation, every corrupt thread. In exchange, Luca stays with someone who can care for him." George hesitated. "You are offering to dismantle your own empire." Henry closed his eyes. "I am offering to become his father again." The deal was struck. Henry cooperated fully, providing testimony that would unravel Dante's network and implicate dozens of mid-level operators. He accepted a plea agreement, a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Audrey signed temporary guardianship papers, her hands shaking as she read the legal language that made her responsible for a boy she had known for less than 3 weeks. But when Luca saw the papers, he took a crayon and drew a circle around both their names. Whole. Connected. The house on the outskirts was small, a 2-bedroom rental with a backyard that needed mowing. Audrey moved in with Luca and Archie, who took on a part-time job to help with expenses. The walls were plain, the furniture second-hand, but the space was filled with light. Every Tuesday, Ingrid visited for therapy sessions. Adelaide came twice a week, working with Luca on rebuilding his vocabulary and confidence. In the evenings, Audrey sat at an old upright piano she had bought at a yard sale, and Luca played Clair de Lune, his small fingers finding the keys with increasing confidence. He played it not as a haunting but as a gift, a thank you rendered in melody. Farah taught Audrey grounding techniques for the flashbacks that still came. Moments when the sound of breaking glass or the smell of rain sent her back to that night in the cellar. Archie became the older brother Luca needed, patient and steady, teaching him how to tie his shoes and ride a bike. In the living room, Luca drew constantly. Circles, now always closed, and within each circle, he drew 3 dots. One labeled Mom, one labeled Dad, one labeled Me. Henry's sentence was reduced to 18 months in a minimum security facility with supervised release. He completed a program on anger management and trauma recovery. When he was released, he did not call ahead. He simply appeared one afternoon, standing outside the chain-link fence that marked the edge of Audrey's yard. He did not enter. He waited. Audrey saw him from the kitchen window. She walked out slowly, Luca's hand in hers. When they reached the fence, Henry spoke. "I kept the west wing locked, because I thought if I sealed the grief away, it would not destroy us. But grief does not disappear. It waits." And Claire de Lune, that was the lullaby Serena sang to Luca every night. I played it on repeat because I thought I could keep her alive in the music. But all I did was trap us both. Audrey studied him. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were clearer. "You are his father, but if you step through that gate, you are only his father. Not a crime lord, not an empire, just a man trying to do better." Henry nodded. "I left the gun in the car. I left the organization behind. I am just a man." Luca let go of Audrey's hand and ran to the fence. Henry knelt on the other side, his fingers threading through the chain links. Luca pressed his small hand against his father's. "Dad." Henry's voice broke. "I am here, son. I am here." The Saturday afternoon sunlight stretched long across the yard. Audrey sat on the porch steps, reading to a small group of children from the neighborhood. A weekly tradition she had started. Luca moved among them, handing out juice boxes and smiling, a sound that had once seemed impossible now bubbling out of him freely. Henry sat in a folding chair near the garden, his hands occupied with thread and needle, mending the old teddy bear one last time. He sewed the final tear with gold thread, a thin, bright line that caught the light. Luca ran across the yard, his sneakers kicking up dust. He grabbed Audrey's hand, then reached for Henry. "Mom, Dad, let us go home." Audrey looked at Henry. Henry looked at Luca. And, together, the 3 of them walked toward the small house. Its door open, its windows glowing warm. In the driveway, Luca stopped and drew a circle in the dirt with a stick. He drew 3 dots inside. Then he drew a larger circle around all of them. Family. The camera that had once tracked every movement in a mansion now sat dark and discarded. The piano inside played a melody not of grief but of arrival. Claire de Lune drifted into the evening air, no longer a ghost, but a bridge between what was lost and what had been found. The bloodstain on the 7th step had never truly disappeared, but it no longer mattered, because home was no longer a place built on silence and control. It was a small house with a mowed lawn, where a boy who had not spoken learned to say the words that mattered most, and where a woman who had lost everything learned that sometimes love does not come from blood, but from the quiet, deliberate choice to stay.